Hello and welcome. This is Tiger Lily. Call me Lil. This is the Succinct and Substantial podcast, and I am very excited to be speaking with my dear friend, Leigh Balzekas. She is, among many other things, a sustainable fashion designer, and most important for our conversation today, she is on the executive board and a founding member of the nonprofit organization, the Sewist Society. Welcome, Leanne. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm so excited to be speaking with you on this specifically.
And you and I, of course, have had a multitude of conversations offline about the SOA Society and the mission that you have, as well as a lot of the things that your business, the Disco Dolls, does in order to be a sustainable community leader. And with that, I want to say congratulations on winning the Sustaining Foundation's Community Leader Award. That was a
Thank you so
fantastic
much.
honor for you.
Thank you so much. We were so excited. Yes.
So I'd like to, if you want to just tell our viewers and listeners just kind of a general overview of what the SOA Society is all about, and then we'll dive into some specifics.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, the Sewist Society, we founded it in 2020, and it is about currently creating a model to have something in every community that tackles textile waste, that tackles overconsumption through education. So, education of teaching people how to sew, bringing it back to really the craft of sewing and elevating sewing as a skill trade. So it's a lot in a small package, but we hope to with our three-prong approach really, give local solutions for this problem that we are all, facing as a modern society.
Okay, now you talked about textile waste. I think a lot of people, I think the enormity of that problem is starting to move from the fringes to the mainstream, and people are starting to have a better understanding of textile waste being such a huge part of just waste in general, our consumer waste in general. Can you speak a little bit more specifically about textile waste and getting rid of the misconceptions around textile waste, are donating fabrics, thinking that things are going to be recycled? Can you dive in a little bit deeper about the issue about textile waste in general, or specifically textile waste?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what really brought me to create the SOA Society because as a sustainable designer and running a zero waste studio and really being the only sewist in my studio, I saw how much waste I created through my alterations business for over a decade. And then I really started looking at the bigger problem of post-consumer textile waste, which is the things we discard. They know that they're end of their life. And, I am part of Fashion Revolution, which is another fantastic organization that brings awareness to this. But as just in the US, every person throws away about 82 pounds on average. And for me, I was reusing everything I could. So I was like, if I'm not doing that, the amount of textile waste that is going into our landfills is insurmountable. And yes, we've had these traditional ways to divert, like donating. And it does feel good to donate and think, oh, this is going to go to someone that needs it. But what has happened over the last 20 years specifically is the amount of clothing items and consumer goods that have been produced has exponentially grown compared to our population. These companies are producing so much more, and we have so much more in our closet. So right now, we are, as a planet, overfilled. We have enough clothing to clothe everyone on the planet many, many times, and without even creating anything new. So for me, the textile waste problem was the kind of big weight that I felt. And looking at that as this industry that I love and that I, made my career in was so destructive. And with the introduction of polyester into our fabrics, in the 70s, it was something that, was innovative and oh, it won't wrinkle and it won't do this. Well, unfortunately, it lasts for 400 years when it is put in the landfill, so that it takes so long to biodegrade. And so we need solutions to recycle that, right? It's why we recycle so many things in our other parts of our life, like single-use plastic, and try to make those efforts and have, as a society, I think, more awareness around that. I do agree. Yeah, there's a lot of studies that have come out, and more of the general public is becoming aware of this huge problem, and they don't know what to do. And so for SOA Society, what I am hoping to do with textile waste is create a solution that is like your friendly neighborhood recycling center. For me, when I went to visit the landfill in like middle school, it was like a field trip we took. It was so impactful because I just like, oh, we throw it away and it goes away. Well, there is no away. And we have to have these solutions. And there really is no broad solution for textile recycling. There's a lot of organizations that are doing their best. And we need all of them. But what I felt is we needed a local solution that could host field trips, could really show like, okay, this is the waste of this community, and this is how we can, offset it. And then by doing that, hopefully educate about overconsumption and things where, if we can all reduce the amount that we're needing to recycle is the ultimate goal as well. So
And helping to sort of turn off the tap. It sounds like one of the things that your goal is about. One of the things that I'm hearing is not just the scale of the problem, but the longevity of this problem as well, because of, the natural fibers that we wear, linen and cotton, and wool, those do break down. They compost back into the earth, just as they always have done for all of the millennia that we have been wearing those fibers as clothing. However, did I hear you right? Polyester lasts for 400 years.
correct.
So
Yeah.
that's
And
that's
we're
how
making
many generations of people. Now, on the one hand, that sounds great, right? Like, oh, we can keep around something that lasts for 400 years if it's usable. But it sounds like one of the things that I have become more aware of, and I think a lot of people are starting to be aware of, is the issue of microplastics. And when we talk about polyester and blended fabrics, right, that might be part natural fiber, but also blended with things like polyester, is that when we wash that clothing, pieces of that break off in little microscopic pieces of plastic that then end up in our bloodstreams and end up in our streams and in our waterways. And that is one of the problems, is the not just the scale and the size of what's in the landfills, but how long it remains in our bodies and in our environments. And you're saying 400 years. That's frightening.
right. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, they're finding it in babies, the microplastics. So and it comes from a lot of different things, but clothing specifically is a huge one because polyester is cheaper. And even though the fabric itself and the fiber and the micros will last that long, they're not making the clothing to last that long. They're, fast fashion brands like Zara and H&M and Forever 21 are making things that are meant to last, maybe 10 wears. And so we're making this thing out of something that lasts for 400 years and it's only supposed to last ten wears for you and you're buying it for, $15. And then a woman probably made that in Bangladesh, who is getting mistreated. So there is this like where this problem really covers so many different things, humanitarian, environmental. And it's why I created the Sewist Society because again, it was pure out of like the insurmountable weight of this issue, and even with not to get too off topic, but with microplastics too, there's studies coming out recently that when we're wearing polyester that we're kind of off-gassing microplastics as well.
oh,
Like it's
just as
not just,
we're wearing them.
yes,
So, and it is real, it's very easy for us to sort of fall down this hole of doom of feeling like,
yes,
because the problem does feel so insurmountable, that what can I do as an individual? And I think that the fact that you started the Sewist Society to start addressing this problem at the local level is one of the best ways that we can overcome that sense of doom, because even if you can, now you said I think it was 84, 85 pounds a year of clothing that we
Oh,
discard,
wow.
and that a huge percentage of that lands in the landfills. It does not end up in the local Goodwill where somebody else gets to wear it. A huge amount of that 85 pounds per year that we may discard doesn't actually end up on somebody else's back. So it's not circular, it's not fully circular staying on people's bodies. It's ending up as an environmental problem. And then you talked about that beginning of the cycle that somebody made that piece of clothing. Somebody actually cut the fabric. They got the pattern, they cut the fabric out and in a factory, probably in pretty bad conditions, and were not paid very well for that. And that factory processing, human hands are touching that, but it's such on such a huge scale, and that's the reason that our clothing can be so cheap, is because somebody isn't getting paid, and it is most likely the person who actually put that garment together before it ever reached the hanger where you bought it. So one of the things that you've talked about for the Sewist Society is elevating the craft and art and science of sewing in particular. So I wanted for you to talk a little bit about, first of all, the word sewist and how you came up with that word and why, and then talk a little bit about this idea of elevating the labor of sewing and what the Sewist Society is doing in order to bring the dignity of that back to human eyes and human hands.
Sure, yeah. So when we were creating this organization, we knew we wanted it to be, textile waste is kind of where it started, but then we wanted to create something where, so many people don't know how to sew, and then the ones that do, we all get classified into like crafters and home sewers, and there's even in the industry, there's seamstresses and tailors. And that's become like a gendered thing as well. We think if someone hears the word tailor, they think a man. They hear the word seamstress, they think a woman. And they think skill levels are different as well. And so I really wanted to just, number one, put an umbrella over everyone and invite everyone to the table, because we need everyone at the table. And so the word sewist for me had been used in kind of pop culture, and I didn't invent it for sure, but it really resonated with me because everyone can be a sewist. And it's a new word that can encompass, this whole thing. And so that's kind of where we landed on that. And we decided to sew a society because we knew that we wanted to, again, bring people to the table, have this discussion, and this thought experiment with us, and then get involved and be a part of something. And that is, and having this model that then can be replicated, and you can create your own sew society in your own community, and that's our ultimate goal. And so with teaching people how to sew, for us, for we've removed kind of how things are made in a lot of different ways in a lot of parts of our culture, and specifically with clothing. There's no home ec in schools anymore. Even in the 90s when I was in high school, it wasn't an option for me. And I had a grandmother that sewed, but she didn't live near me. So even wanting to be a fashion designer, I learned how to sew in fashion design school in college. And as soon as you learn how to sew, as soon as you pick up a needle and thread, even if you're hand sewing, you realize like how much of a skill it is, how much there is, for me, like the muscle memory after being a sewist for over 20 years, how much I do that I don't even realize. When I teach, I make sure that I speak what I want them to do, and then I show them, because there's things my hands do that I don't even know anymore. And so and as soon as I've had countless students in classes say, I thought I overpaid for this sewing job, for this cushion I got recovered, or this alteration I had, but actually I underpaid. This is really hard, and so we've been separated from that. And it's why, like Fashion Revolution, I mentioned earlier, is a great organization. For years, their whole campaign was who made my clothes, to put a human face to it. And then also the fact that everything is handmade. Even that, $10 dress from Target is somebody's hands are making it. And I think people think like, oh, they're just popping it out of a 3D printer, or they're, we have all this technology, but fabric and fiber is fluid, and there isn't a replication of human hands as of yet. Even, and it would be way too expensive to have robots make clothes. So, we might as well exploit women specifically. 80% of garment workers are women. So for me as a women's rights activist as well, it was such a huge thing for me to, even if somebody just takes one class and learns how to sew and is like, this is hard, I'm going to pay someone to do this, they leave with a better understanding of maybe when they see that dress for $15, they're going to think about not purchasing it. Or maybe when they see a designer garment or something that they're like local fashion designer, because we're out there, there's local fashion designers in every community. And, you're going to think, oh, you know what? This $150 dress is actually a really good value because this person made it. And I think that is such a huge part of it for us because you can't just say, stop buying stuff, it's bad. You have to like create this whole narrative that we've been kind of that has been removed from our culture, really. So we're kind of want to inject this narrative back in that is and sewing isn't kind of up there with like even mechanic or a carpenter or a welder or something like that. It has been devalued over the last, 50 years, and we don't have manufacturing in the US as much anymore. And so that's part of our goal is to really at the ground level and to teach people how to do their own alterations and to extend the life of their clothing, because that's a huge part of this too. If we're extending the life, if we're using things longer, we automatically reduce the carbon footprint. So it's all part of this holistic kind of approach.
I want to draw attention to the tank top that I'm wearing. You might remember this tank top. This is one of the I bought this tank top on a clearance rack from a very expensive store and felt like I was paying too much money for it when I bought it. But I loved it. I loved the color. I loved the cut. And it didn't fit me quite right. Even when I bought it, it didn't fit me quite right, but I loved everything about it, and I groused. And this top is probably 20 years old now, so I want to talk a little bit about that longevity of something that I paid that much money for. And I don't even remember how much money I paid for it. I remember that it was on the clearance rack, and the reason that it was on the clearance rack is because it didn't, it probably had gone through several people trying it on, and it didn't fit people quite right. I was included in that, but I thought, I love the color. I love the shape. I'm just going to wear it. And then I'll always wear it like with a jacket over it or something because it had these little gaps on the side. And so I just dealt with the fact that it didn't fit quite right until I met you and had seen that you were, and at that point, you were still doing alterations a little bit. You were moving away from just doing alterations and trying to teach people how to do alterations. But because I had come to you and specifically said, I love this garment. I've had it for, at that point, it was probably 10 years. But I want to point that out too, that I bought something that was made from a really good knitted fabric and it was well constructed. Even though it didn't fit me quite right, it was just not
Yeah.
made for my particular body type, but it had lasted me that long. And I really wanted to be able to continue wearing it. And so I brought it to you and you altered it for me so that it would fit me properly. And it's lasted me now for 20 years. And I would like to point out that and so now, because I've had it for 20 years, however much I spent on it back then, I've now probably paid pennies per wear for as many times as I have worn this top. So I think that's also part of of increasing what you're doing, of teaching people the skills of sewing, because now, having gone to some of those classes, now I can understand how I can now repair that piece of clothing. And repair and mending, of course, we refer to as sewing, but I feel like your approach with the Sewist Society is mending and repairing on this very global holistic front, because you've touched on several different things. You've touched on environmental justice. You talked about social justice when you talk about the women who are putting together. 80% of the people who make our clothing are women, and they're very often in countries that are that don't have the kind of human rights focus that we hope that the United States does. So you're touching on a whole lot of things with the Sewist Society. And one of the things that you brought up in the word society, I think, is also really important, that creates hope, right? Because we're trying to be very solution oriented and not fall into this doom spiral of, yes, the problem is so massive. How do we begin to tackle it? The SOA Society, it sounds like what you're saying isn't just about like the teaching, like teaching classes, but also a community of people who get together and spend time with each other, learning these skills and teaching these skills to each other. And I think that's also inherent in that word society. So if you can talk a little bit about how that requires space, and if you can talk a little bit about your vision and the need for a physical space to do these things and having the community hub, which is one of the SOA Society's goals.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll start. I'm a big picture person. I start up here and then scale down. So, my ultimate goal, just briefly, would be, like a Meals on Wheels, to have a franchised SOA society in every community, have it be a place where we can intake post-consumer textiles to recycle them, as well as sewing supplies and fabric. That we can have a workshop where people can come and work independently, but we can also give classes and have meetups on the regular, where we can have an education space where we can host panel discussions and talks, where we can really, again, come together as a community and inform each other and learn from each other about this, but also just how to style a new garment, or how to, because clothing is so powerful too. It's why I became a fashion designer, because we all have to participate. We're not a nudist community. And so you have to put on clothes when you leave the house. So we're all contributing and actively, I lost my train of thought there, but creating in this space of like wearing clothes, and you make those choices. So ultimately, if we had this space where we could, now what I plan to do with, there's some textiles that can't be saved, they're at the end of their life. And so we want an industrial textile shredder where we can shred that up and make that polyester back into a raw material that then can be created into something else, so that we can, instead of that 400 years in the landfill, we can just keep reusing what we've already created. And with the natural fibers, we can just shred those and compost them, as we talked about earlier. So it's really this like hub of everything that has to do with textiles and sewing. And so what we're doing now, and what, because we don't have a space currently, we have a couple of pop-ups that we do, and we have a society, a small society that we've built here in Tampa, Florida. And what we're fundraising for right now is the first envision of this. So 1,000 square foot space where we can test all these theories out, where we can have a small little textile shredder, where we can have a small classroom, and then where we can have a small sewist shop where artists and sewists and anyone looking for fabric and textiles can come and purchase, you know, uh, items that are, have already been purchased. So used, textiles and clothing. If you're a sewist at all, you have a fabric room, you have extra fabric, so we all know what that looks like. So a marketplace, if you will, for those kind of materials. So again, as I talked about in the beginning, we have this three-pronged approach to dealing with waste, but then also creating this community. And that's why we call it the community hub and not just a textile recycling center, because even though that's what it is, it's so much more. So, really this place where, again, you can come bring your textiles to get recycled properly. You can come learn how to extend the life of your textiles, but you can also then come and just learn from other sewists as well, if you're a sewist yourself. And then what has already happened in our small society and community that we've created is people that don't have the aptitude for sewing, or it's not their interest level. So they have then sought us out to find a sewist to pay them to do the project that they're looking for. So, and we have further plans to create a home sewist program where we can take these textiles that we can reuse and make them into new products, and actually pay a home workforce to create this, and to sew this at home and create this, other stream of income as well. And then I have a lot of plans for bringing in a master alterations person and having an accelerator program where we can teach people how to be an alterations professional, and then they can then go out and create their own small business from that because we need alterations people in the community as well. So there's so many different facets where this can grow into just a really joyous place, actually, which is was my ultimate goal for, okay, we have this huge weight of this problem, and how do we start addressing that? And everything I've seen is this grassroots community, and that's where I can only affect my small community. And so that's what we're trying to do now, but then with the hope to create this model to grow it into something big.
That scalable model, it seems like, is a really important part of what you're doing, and starting with these several different small approaches, but making it so that you provide a model for how other communities can do this. And having recently relocated from Tampa and then up to Philadelphia, it was delightful to me to see that there are similar things and similar organizations that are already in place here in the Philadelphia area. So it seems very clear to me, just from having gone from one place to another and seeing that, and successfully. Fab Scrap is just one example. Now they used to have a hub here in Philadelphia, but they're New York. I think they're Brooklyn based, and they are just a textile hub. They don't offer classes. All they have, it's just literally it's a clearinghouse for people to bring fabrics, and then they have sorters who go through and separate out the fabric that can be reused, and then you can buy bundles of that fabric, or it gets shredded into, I think it's called shoddy, the where it gets broken down. So there's that, and then there's also places that are like secondhand thrift shops. And it sounds like one of the things that you're trying to do is sort of take this multiple pronged approach of being a place where people can shop for reclaimed fabrics. People can donate and bring fabrics and notions and sewing machines and things like that, but also, and I think this is one of the most important parts of what the Sewist Society is doing, is the community center aspect of it, because people, especially post-pandemic, kind of don't know how to be with each other anymore, right? And we're relearning how to do that. We're relearning how to be together as human beings and not just, and then at the same time solving some of the problems. The Sewist Society offers sewing classes. And I think just this past weekend or the weekend before, you had a sewing class on making your own throw pillow out of reclaimed materials. And then is it on the first Monday of every month that you have the Stitch and Bitch, where people can just come together and bring whatever sewing projects they're working on?
Yeah, so it's actually the second Monday. So the second Monday of every month, we do host a community sewing circle. We call it Stitch and Bitch. And so that you can, and it's really, we created it as an open house thing for new people, but also, there are some sewists that don't, most of our class requests are for beginners because there's so many people that want to learn, which is great. But then that kind of leaves out like the more advanced sewists that might not need to take a class but want to participate in the community. So that is a free meetup that you can just come and show up and work on something or bring something to do show and tell. I'm always there to help with any kind of new people, or if you have a project you're stuck on, you can bring it, and the hive mind can kind of help to maybe figure out that issue. So, yeah, it's just kind of a gathering. And then, what always ends up happening is we have these discussions about like extending the life of your clothing and why that's important. And it just kind of naturally happens. So, and yes, we have our throw pillow class actually used some of our shoddy. Shoddy was actually like a word that was coined in like the 1800s because a lot of manufacturing used to be more circular when we didn't have this kind of industrialized waste production model. And so like what Fab Scrap does is amazing. And they do pre-consumer recycling, where again, they take that fabric and there's a lot of that as well. There's, I think they offset I was so when they started, I actually contacted them and I was like, "Great, can you take my scraps?" And they're like, "Well, we only do New York." And I was like, "Fair enough, I get it because there's so much. It's such a huge problem." And so actually, they were a big inspiration for me, to start something on the local level because I know just as a local alterationist, fashion designer, and running a zero waste studio, I had so much that I couldn't fit in my studio anymore, and so even being conscious of it, I was still creating all this waste. So um, I got a little off topic there, but yes. So to circle back, we have classes. We have Stitch and Bitch once a month that's free that you can come to, and then also we have our Instagram is a place where we have a lot of people from all over the country that follow us there, and where we want to have discussions. We do also have a Patreon that we're going to be utilizing a lot more that you're going to be helping us with as well. And we want to create these virtual places for discussion as well, because that again, that's the ultimate way to create something new, but then also to make a positive change in our world. So
Yeah, starting local and then, utilizing the technology that we have. And can I just say how awesome it is that you and I used to have these discussions a lot in person. And full transparency, I am also on the board of the Sewist Society. Thank you for letting me be a part of the organization. So that is one of the reasons why I wanted to get with you today on my podcast, but also as just part of the being a member of the Sewist Society. I have quite literally a vested emotional interest in uplifting your mission. So we're rolling up on the end of our conversation, and you had mentioned Instagram, you'd mentioned Patreon. So there's a lot of different ways that people can engage with the Sewist Society, and I will be putting the links to all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening or watching, you'll be able to click on all of those links and follow the Sewist Society. If you are local to the Tampa area, then you can follow the Instagram page or the Patreon page to find out when the local events are happening. And then Leanne, you and I are going to be coordinating on doing some more of these online activities that we can then expand to the community out larger. And in the interest of that scalable model of, having a community center, but because we are connected over the internet, there is a way for us to continue expanding our reach and particularly expanding the knowledge base about this. And in just the brief conversation that we've had, learned a lot about 400 years for polyester to break down. And who knows, like all of the damage that gets done along that 400-year route.
yeah.
And then if we're discarding 86 pounds, that's like each of us. And there are over just like 1.3 million people in the Tampa Bay area alone. So if you just do the math there, it becomes sort of mind-boggling. And that's just post-consumer waste. And we were talking about fab scrap only does pre-consumer waste. So the SOA Society is specifically trying to deal with the post-consumer waste and interrupting that post-consumer waste cycle. So
Well,
as
and just one quick note that I just want to add in there is the donation centers are fantastic and it's great, but they're getting too much. They are overrun. They have to ship off hundreds of thousands of pounds, tons, every year to other countries that then are getting clogged. So that's also why it's like, yes, donating is great, but there's too much being donated. So we need all these other solutions, including buying less and making it last.
buying less and making it last. That is a really good place, I think, for us to highlight the mission of what you're doing, creating more longevity in your wardrobe period, and then just consuming less. So I want to tie this all back to fashion. You're a fashion designer and you are a style maven, and I like to think that I am too. And I wonder how much of this that we can do to reach the individual human being, especially the younger generations that are coming up and starting to be aware of these issues. How much of this do you feel like we can solve by teaching people about having their own personal style so that they do not feel manipulated into just buying whatever is fashionable versus having your own personal style means that you're going to be more conscious about what and when you buy.
Oh, sorry, my connection
I
got
think
a
our
little.
connection was a
Yeah, so
little
I think what you were asking is how we can reach. Yeah, yeah, that's
individual
okay. Can you
personal
hear me?
style as a way of connecting people to not being manipulated by
Yeah, absolutely.
the fashion industry.
Yeah, and it's wear what you want, wear what makes you feel powerful, and find those things from small designers at secondhand stores. There's so much clothing out there that on and actually sustainable fashion and sustainable living is cheaper because as you stated with that shirt that you've had for 20 years, the amount of per wear is so minimal, and we all go to the grocery store and we look at like, okay, how much is this per ounce? And if I buy the bigger one, I'm actually saving money. With clothing, it's like, how long is this going to last me? Can I wear it 30 times? And then wearing what you want and really claiming your own power with that.
Okay, that sounds like a really great place for us to close this message on about having your own style, being conscious about it. And so let's wrap up, if you will. Just let us know what is the next thing that you have coming up for the Sewist Society, and tell us a little bit more about the capital campaign to find a community center.
Absolutely. So through Zephy, which we have a capital campaign up, which is a great website that offers free payment processing for nonprofits. And on there is our whole mission of like exactly where the money's going to go, exactly what we're going to purchase with it. We're trying to raise $40,000 to fund 1 year of our community center on a small scale of just 1,000 square feet to really be able to start creating this model and having some data. And so you can contribute to that. If we get 800 people to contribute $50, we'll be at our goal. So it doesn't take much. And then we will definitely use this data to then create more and continue from there. So you would be helping contribute to something that we're hoping to solve this issue. So the sewistsociety.org is where you can find all of the information as well and all the links to our classes. We're going to have some fun things coming up in April for our Fashion Revolution Week, as well as our regular monthly class and Stitch and Bitch that happens. And you can find all of that information on our website.
Awesome. And that brings us up to our 40 minutes. So, Leanne, thank you for your time and the Sewist Society.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to be posting this today as soon as the video finishes processing, and we'll put this out both on audio